Welcome again to Wickerson Studios. I'll try and jazz this up a little bit with some parametric and computational control. I might play around with my C# components, which might be interesting. But let's just start with what the basic tutorial is when you go into the Help Rhino, Learn Rhino, and download your samples and grab yourself your C-planes. I've just highlighted and zoomed in on the perspective angle. And the guidelines for this is pretty straightforward. They ask you to go in and learn how to change your viewports by just clicking over here. You can also change by going into your view, setting your C-planes, and that's exactly where we're going to start. So let's jump here, and I think the first example was go to panel 1, go up to view and set C-plane by 3 points. Pop it down here, set your X direction over here and your Y direction up here, and you've got a nice C-plane on there. And at that point, you would jump back into view, you would set your C-planes, name your C-planes, and you can just default to C-plane 1. And that's done. And then they say, okay, with that C-plane 1, go up to your solids, grab yourself a cylinder, make yourself a cylinder, draw it out, and bam, you've got something pretty exciting. Then they say, try it again. And I'm not going to do it more than twice, but you can play with every side. You can set your C-planes by 3 points. Set this one here, this one here, this one here. And you've got another C-plane that you can go into and do a quick little solid extrusion. Let's do a cylinder again. Bamf, and pull that one out, and you're playing off of that C-plane. So you're becoming more and more talented at this. Save that as C-plane 2. And they go on and on and on and on. And then they say, okay, well, after you've chosen all the sides you want to do, let's go into here. And I think what they do then is they go into View, C-planes, and say, why don't you try setting something to object? And they say, good object is this right here. Actually, we'll do 4. Just choose that. And it says, do you want that polysurface? You could do the text and set it to the text, but let's set it to that. And there you go. Your C-plane is right on that surface. And you can go back in and default that to 3. So that's basically it. And I didn't put anything on that one. If you want to return your view to your setting your C-planes, world top, and bam, you're right back to where it is. Exciting. So that was done. Go back to the beginning. How could we do something with that in Grasshopper? Let's do a little fandangly-dingly and see what happens. So I am going to grab... we'll use the container names. Why not? I don't usually use planes, but we have an object, first of all, so I'm going to use a boundary representation, but since I like geometry, we'll just grab that whole geometry and import that as the geometry we want to play with. Object reference, there you go. And we can take this one. I'm going to leave it in there for now because I want to pull a bunch of planes off of it. So we will grab a plane, and let's grab a plane here and go copy. Space those apart. Actually, that's not going to work. I have to space them out like this. I wish I knew a faster way, but I like to show off my super intelligence once in a while. And we can grab each one of those surfaces and construct a plane related to those. So let's grab this one and set one plane. We'll set it to here, and do exactly what we did on that last one. And there we go. We've got a nice little plane that's playing off of that, and I can do some fancy rotations on that. That's 1, 2, 3. Let's take 3 and set a plane to Banff, which is a great art center in Canada if you ever want to go to it. And there we go. I think I have it set right. Looks like I missed it by a little bit. Actually, I didn't. It's just that's tapered in a bit. So in order to stay perpendicular to the X, it's going to miss that line a bit. But that's just a little snap that happened. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's grab this one and set this one to set one plane to here, and we'll kind of jostle it up in that way. And there we go. We've got a plane playing off of the... Actually, I'm not too happy with that one. Let's set another plane, set one plane to here, and I'm going to play it off there. And there we go. Now I have a nice surface rotation. 5, 6, and since we don't have 7 sides, well, 6 would be down here. I think that's enough to play with. I'm going to get carried away. Let's just do something parametric in Grasshopper. If you've taken the time to learn how to download plugins and import those into your special folders, component folders, and take a look at all the things you might want to play with, I don't have too many. I've really pared them down to what it is. I think bifocals is tucked into there somewhere. I just can't remember where I have it hidden, or maybe it's hidden off at another roaming site somewhere in Grasshopper. I couldn't tell you. my file storage certainly needs to be improved a little bit. I've played around with this Alienware computer so much. So these sides, I think it might be nice to do something in plane. So let's just stay here, go to plane, and see what you can do. Well, I like this rotation plane, and I've done this before. I'm going to take that plane, and I'm going to rotate it, and I'm going to keep this different. And you can do it in different ways. Once you start to cut and paste in scripts, you'll learn from most people in C# and Python that that's kind of bad etiquette. You want to be using a little more of your data lists and your lists of list trees to actually perform things. But I'm going to send this through a rotation of pi, which I enjoy so much, and I'm not really a fan of, I can't remember what the other thing's called when you don't use, and once again, I'm copying a little too much for my liking, but I don't mind because it actually allows for basic understanding of what's happening in the scripting. A lot of my beginning scripters actually keep things, a little too, it looks like there's too much of the same thing going on in the visual script, and it's going to have an influence on how you script when we tuck these into GH nodes and C# nodes, which will be the last portion of this once we're done doing the basic training of Rhino in the 1 and 2 series. So I'm going to go ahead and use my sets because I think math sets and vectors are really the key to understanding. If you want to get into this, we'll grab a range, and we'll take that range through a domain, and we're going to set that domain up to I'm going to go from 0 to 2.0, and I'm going to have that as the top range in that. And that one I'm going to basically range. I put that into steps, which is foolish to do. I want to actually disconnect that by Control-Shift. You'll see that right there. I want my domain going all the way up to 2. And then I'm going to copy and paste this again. Once again, not good practice if you actually want to impress somebody. But since nobody else is seeing my script and it's just for me, I think I'm okay with that. I'm going to have a range that flies through all the way up to 2, all the way up to 1, and all the way up to 0.5. And that's going to be good enough for me to rotate those. And you can see that the numbers are doing that. And I'm going to have my step count on each one ranging from 2 steps to whatever I choose to do. So as I look at these plane rotations on all 3, I can have an effect on how many I want rotating through there and what's playing. Now, why didn't my why isn't this one revolving a little bit? I've got it set all the way to 2 pi, which is not fun. Let's do 1.5. Let's do 1.5, and then you can see the rotation of that. 2 planes. If we do 3, you'll get it equals out. There's 4 comes up nicely there, 2 comes up there, and 4 comes up there. So I'm going to take the objects themselves and throw them through that rotation. And let's see if we cannot do a transformation of rotate 3D. And let's see what happens when I grab that geometry. And we're going to do this again 3 times. Not great practice, but once again, it's what I'm going to do, so it kind of makes a little sense to newcomers. You can get a little tied here when you do this. I'm going to take the angle through, this being not an angle. This is, you're going to want to go in and find out what you're dealing with. You're dealing with planes, but through that, what is it giving us? It's giving us 5 little branches there. If I start to pump it into the angles as that object, I'm going to want a centroid to each of those objects. And let's just see the magic that kind of happens. Go in here and grab your centroid center. You could one thing I'm going to do is, that's not the plane, the object's over here. The object being this one, I'm supposed to be rotating this geometry, and this geometry, and seeing what happens to that geometry as I take it through each one of those. And because they're lists, you'll see what's happening here on the angles is they're not doing, I believe they're just choosing the first one. So if I flatten this and take all of those, if I graph that and take each one of those as a rotation, let me see how that's playing out with this one. Rotation, of course I have to put in my angles. Get rid of my graph for now and just play a little bit with that being my first object. Is this object moving? It doesn't have its axis of rotation. It does have an axis right now. It has a center. I'm going to have to pull out my centroids. So let's actually, to jive it up a little bit, and I'm just thinking to make it a little exciting, I want to deal with areas. And the area is going to deal with a surface debrep. And that debrep faces have to be a list item. And that's where I jump into sets. Sets, list item. And that will allow me to grab the faces, and I should be able to roll through this as an index. I think there's 6 faces, so I'll go from 0 to 5, and that will be my number. And now when I take this, which is a little jumbly bumbly here, and copy that, once again, you don't want to be doing this too much. I'm going to grab those 4 nodes, 3 nodes in the slider. I'm going to take the centroid as the center of rotation, center of rotation, and center of rotation, and now I should start to get multiple objects as I play through that. Now what happened here, the list item here is playing off of surface. My list should be this face, and that should be a set, and there you go. You start to get this interesting rotation of what you've done. And I've got 4 items, which I don't know if I want 4. I'm going to bring it back down to 1 item each, and because I'm showing everything, you can see what I've ended up making, this kind of jumbly, awkward thing. And bring your counts down if you don't want to have something too complex. Like once you start doing that, you get a lot of planes in there. And I'm going to keep the script pretty simple and get myself to not bring it above 3. And I'll go somewhere between 1 and 3. And that should be enough to start. And I've got some interesting geometries that are rolling off because I dealt with ranges. I also want to make sure my range is counting 4 here. So I'm going to take my steps and I'm going to use my expression node because I'll be getting into the habit of scripting a little more. And I'm flying through this, but why not? Why not try and keep? Well, you can always slow it down. And people always say, well, what exactly are you trying to do, Mike? And I say, well, we're just trying to play. So we're going to grab that one. Instead of having to type that in again, it might be easy just to copy that twice, slide it up here, put my domain into there, put my domain into there. And I think, no, I want this to be my domain, I want this to be my domain, and I want that to be my domain. So now I've got my parameters that I'm playing with. And there we go. And that should make it a little more easy. And of course, I've got to throw through my factor here because I want to mess with it and have some fun. So I've got all these different shapes that are playing. And if at times I'm not wanting all 3 of those, or I want to wrap through an index number different surfaces as I go, as the center to rotate, you can see what happens when I start to move this one up and this one up. Let me see what's happening. I should have a centroid that's different. The faces are what are rotating. Let me get my points here. I've got my okay, I've got my those are my surfaces being chosen. Let me see if I can't roll those through another number. Okay, I'm losing myself. Centroids are here. Centroids are all the same in each one because my list of faces is tied to this plane. There should be a different plane on this one. So those planes should be a little different, but I can see what's happened here is I haven't debrepped that, and I haven't debrepped that. And that should allow for a little more chaos, there we go, for rotating those on different ones. And you can choose different faces to pop those around. Now, why are those faces not choosing different centroids? Let me think about this. Why am I not going through my list length? Because I have not flattened my list. So I'm going to flatten my list. This is how I kind of think. There we go. And I should be able to, with this one, pop that one around on different faces. So you can see it do-si-does, does a little jig. And I'm going to flatten my list also because I want everything on the same branch. I don't want everything on its own branch. And now I've made a very, cumbersome script that you've got to neaten up at this point. I've got my centroids here. Let's get those organized and pull those over. And once you can erase your wires and you start following things, this actually isn't too hard to follow if you get this organized. I'm going to grab these numbers and have fun with shifting those parametrically. I might bring my parameters back over here because they're very playful. And then I can continue with my brep surfaces, which should be dealing okay. Straighten those up. That's all straight and dandy before. I had a little bit here that was telling me what was going on. We'll just grab this whole kit and caboodle and know that we are dependent on these planes and this original surface. I've got a parametric kind of model that I can take this one and delete. And now you can see very playfully how I can run off these different ones as I go. And as I get into my steps and change them 1, 2, 3, I flatten them so it's not actually choosing multiple surfaces. It's actually rolling through those flattened surfaces. So actually, I don't know if my range really matters in what I'm doing. So you may want to play around with this. What happens when I graph that one? There we go. I'm much happier with the graph, and I think actually the graph works just the same without it. So I flatten to get an understanding of what I'm doing, and then I unflatten so I can go back and have a few geometries like this. And I can't say I'd normally make these little box cubes like this, but it is dependent on that original shape. So if you pull out that original shape and you start editing that Polysurface, and you take that and you maybe select edit this surface, Control Shift that surface, Polysurface, and I start to extrude that up, you'd see everything else, ooh, pretty nasty what it just chose to do. It probably had some falters in trying to build those surfaces. Having a feeling that surface is going to have major effects on this if I set one geometry type to that. There we go. So let's hide it now. And I've made an effect on that original one right here. I'm going to hide that away. Starts to make some pretty interesting geometries. And you're like, well, what exactly has happened? And at that point, I'm going to grab them all. I'm going to bake. Usually I bake them different colors, but I'm going to group them all into one thing and see what we have. Did we bake it? Is it thinking? Oh, what has happened? Here we go. Let me try again. Bake and join. And there we go. I've got that first one selected there. This one I'll have to bake separately. I guess it just chose the last one, which is fine. And this one here, which I'm going to bake. And I have created something in the complexities of my own creations, trying to find things. The numbers have done some weird stuff on here and weren't too happy being stretched. I probably should have taken them off beforehand, but I didn't. And that's really where, creatively, you start to explore some things. I hope that one will bake, 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 bake. There we go. So I can leave Grasshopper now. I don't need to be looking at anything. I've created some things with these strange numbers that have really asked me to say, what exactly are you wanting me to do? And each one of these units, I'm just going to end on this because I usually end in total and utter chaos. We'll take this to a render. Bamf. We'll zoom back out. And we will put that one into something painted. Let's just paint. Let's just do the old RGB red, just to have it. Go to this one. That's not too bad to look at. I mean, it's a little spontaneous, which I really enjoy. This way of working spontaneously. We'll grab a blue, and we'll grab a. I'm sure there's faster ways to do this, but I have my clumsy, kind of ignorant ways of enjoying myself. And, you do go back through these things in a hope of, the goal is to actually unlearn bad habits and learn better habits and quicker habits as you go, because I believe people should get paid by, the job, not so much by the time spent on that job. I've got these three strange objects that I might at this point would have difficulty with those hollows, with the numbers, and I don't mind them. I like this funk that's happened here, but I'm not going to even try and Boolean union these together because they are open because of those numbers I didn't include in the stretch. But if that's what you thought this model might end up moving towards, and some say, well, Mike, you really just don't know what you're doing, do you? And I'm like, well, usually when I'm playing around, I don't sweat it too much. If it takes long on the technical views or the pen and inks and things like that, it's usually because you've got some irregularities, but I always like the artistic pen technical to see what I did, and then I'll pull this back, and without even going into a C note or doing anything too fancy, I'm writing a pretty basic script. I call that like a 101 script there. I think I've created something half decent, worth looking at. Let's throw it into a little turntable again, which is definitely more exciting than the demo you were going to do. And actually, I wanted to do this one on turntable. Let's cancel that, and I meant to do the turntable here. So there we go. Got a little rotation, and that could really, get you in trouble at work, or it might actually get you noticed at work in a good way. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you soon. We will move on to using the elevator mode and learning really nicely how to customize some chair designs. And maybe some of you in some odd way think of these as chair designs. And if you do, then reach out to me and talk to me, because I love talking stuff like this. Thanks again. It's a mix of research, development, creativity, critique, and then back into the research.